Lieutenant Maya Torres stood at the edge of the crater and could not believe what she was seeing in front of her eyes. The snow around the impact site had melted away completely, and the ground beneath was scorched black like something had burned. It, with incredible heather team of soldiers, stood behind her with their weapons ready, but nobody was shooting because nobody knew what they were looking at. The creature was massive, and it lay sprawled across the frozen ground with its wings stretched. Out on both sides, each wing was longer than a school bus and covered in scales that changed color when the light hit them. Sometimes the scales looked dark blue, like the ocean at night, and sometimes they looked silver like moonlight on water. Maya had been a soldier for 7 years, and she had seen many strange things during her time in the military, but nothing like this. The creature was breathing slowly, and each breath created clouds of steam in the cold Arctic air its body was covered in wounds, and some of them were still bleeding a strange liquid that glowed faintly in the dim light, but the creature itself was not what made Maya feel like her heart had stopped beating in her chest. There was a woman lying across the dragon, and she looked like she had fallen from the sky along with the beast. The woman had long silver hair that spread across the dark scales like a waterfall of starlight. She wore armor that was black as midnight and seemed to drink in all the light around it. The armor covered most of her body, but Maya could see her face and her arms. Her skin was pale like fresh snow, and there were strange markings on her arms that glowed with a soft golden light. The markings looked like writing, but not in any language Maya had ever seen before. The woman had pointed ears that stuck out from her silver hair, and Maya realized she was looking at something that should not exist. An elf from fairy tales and fantasy stories, but here in the real world, lying injured and helpless in the Arctic wasteland. Maya took a step forward, and her boots crunched on the frozen ground. The sound seemed very loud in the silence. The woman stirred, and her eyes opened slowly. Maya gasped because the woman had eyes that were pure gold. Like molten metal, the golden eyes focused on Maya, and the woman tried to move, but she could not. She made a small sound of pain and frustration. Maya moved closer carefully with her hand on her weapon, but not drawing it. She knelt down beside the woman, and the elf looked at her with those impossible golden eyes. The woman spoke, and her voice was soft but clear. She spoke in English, but with an accent that Maya had never heard before. It sounded old and musical, like someone singing a sad song. The woman said that she could not move her wings or stand up. Maya looked confused because the woman had no wings that she could see. The woman had arms and legs in a human body shape, except for the pointed ears and the glowing markings, but there were no wings anywhere on her body. The woman saw Maya looking, and she said something about a binding spell. She said it was still active, and it was holding her down. Maya did not understand what that meant, but she could see that the woman was telling the truth about not being able to move. The woman tried again to lift her arm, but it only moved a few inches before stopping, as if hitting an invisible wall. Maya looked back at her team and gestured for them to lower their weapons. Corporal Lisa Hayes was the first to step forward. She was a tough woman with short red hair, and she had been Maya's best friend since basic training. Lisa looked at the elf woman and then at the dragon, and she shook her head slowly. She said that this was impossible, and that they must all be dreaming or hallucinating. Argent Danny Wright agreed, and said that maybe there was a gas leak at the base. He was a big man with dark skin and a calm voice that never seemed worried about anything, but now his voice shook a little as he spoke. Claire Madison was their communications expert, and she was already taking pictures with her phone. She was young and excited, and she kept saying that nobody would believe this. Maya told her to stop taking pictures and focus on their job. Kevin Park was their medic, and he moved forward to examine the woman. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke unless he had something important to say. He knelt beside the elf woman and asked her where she was hurt. The woman said she was not hurt by the foul. She said the binding spell was what was hurting her. She said it was draining her life force slowly, and that in a few days she would be dead. Kevin looked at Maya with worried eyes. He said that the woman seemed to be in pain, but he could not find any physical injuries. Then something incredible happened. A voice spoke inside Maya. It was not her own thoughts. It was a different voice that was deep and ancient and tired. The voice said to help the woman or the world would burn. Maya jumped back and Drew her weapon shy, looked around wildly, trying to find who had spoken. Lisa grabbed her arm and asked what was wrong. Maya pointed at the dragon shy, said the dragon had spoken to her. Lisa looked at her like she had gone crazy. But then the dragon, massive. I opened the eye was huge, and it was the same golden color as the woman Aista. I looked directly at Maya, and she felt the voice in her head again. The dragon said that it could speak mind to mind. It said that its name was Azareth, and that the woman name was Seraphina, said that they had fallen through a hole between worlds, and that they needed help. Desperately, Maya felt like she was going to faint. She had trained for combat and rescue, missions and disasters. She had not trained for talking. Dragons and elf women with magic spells. But she was a soldier, and soldiers did their duty, even when things made no sense. Took a deep breath and steadied herself. She asked Azareth what had happened and why they were here. The dragon said it was a long story and that Seraphine could explain better, but time was running short and they needed to act quickly. Maya looked at Seraphine, and the elf woman was watching her with those golden eyes. There was hope in those eyes, but also sadness. Seraphine said that she had been fighting a war that humans did not know about. She said that there were creatures called devourers that wanted to consume Earth. She said that she and Azareth had been guarding the barrier between worlds for many years, but something had gone wrong in the last battle. Someone had betrayed them and sabotaged their defenses. Hafini and Azareth had fallen through the barrier and landed here on Earth. The spell that was supposed to seal the barrier behind them had caught them instead. Now, they were trapped and dying slowly while the barrier remained open. Maya asked what would happen if the barrier stayed open. Seraphine looked at her and said that the devourers would come through. She said they would drain all the life from Earth, and humans would never see them coming. She said it would look like people were just getting sick and dying for no reason, but really, they would be feeding invisible monsters from another dimension. Maya felt cold fear spread through her body. She looked at her team and saw the same fear on their faces. They had all heard Seraphine words clearly. Lisa asked if this was really happening or if they had all lost their minds. Danny said that it did not matter if there was even a small chance that this was real, then they had to help. Claire was pale and shaking, but she nodded in agreement. Kevin was already examining Seraphine more carefully, trying to understand the invisible force holding her. Don Maya made a decision. She said they would take Seraphine back to the base. She said they would figure out how to break this binding spell. She said they would save both the elf woman and the dragon and protect Earth from these devourer creatures. Seraphine smiled weakly and said that Maya was very brave. She said that most humans would have run away or attacked them. Maya said that she was not most humans. She said she was a soldier, and soldiers protected people living if those people were elves from another world. Azareth made a sound that might have been approval. The dragon said that it was too large to move to the base. It said it would stay here and wait. Maya said she would send people to help Azareth and bring supplies. She said they would not let the dragon die alone in the cold. Her team worked quickly to prepare Seraphine for transport. They rigged up a stretcher and carefully lifted the elf woman onto it. Seraphine gasped in pain as they moved. Herkevin gave her something for the pain, but he said he did not know if human medicine would work on her. Seraphine said it helped a little as they carried her toward their vehicle. Maya looked back at Azareth. Dragon massive form was already being covered by fresh snow. Goldeneye watched them leave, and Maya heard the voice in her head one more. Timisrith said thank you and that it would wait for them to return. Maya promised they would come back. She promised they would save both Seraphine and Azareth's. Promised they would stop the devourers. She did not know how she would keep these promises, but she knew she had to try, because if she did not, then everyone on Earth would die without ever knowing why. The vehicle drove away from the crater, leaving deep tracks in the snow behind them. The dragon lay alone under the gray Arctic sky, and somewhere far away the barrier between worlds stood open, waiting for monsters to pour through. The base medical facility had never held a patient like Seraphine before, and the doctors did not know what to do with her. Maya had cleared out the entire wing and posted guards at every entrance. She told everyone that this was a classified situation, and that nobody could talk about what they had shined, but word was already spreading through the Base soldiers whispered about the strange woman with silver hair and pointed ears. They talked about the massive creature lying in the crater 50 miles away. Some people said it was a government experiment gone wrong. Others said it was aliens from space. Nobody guessed the truth because the truth was too strange to imagine. Seraphine lay on the medical bed and she looked very weak. The glowing marks on her skin were fading and her golden eyes had lost some of their brightness. Kevin had hooked her up to monitoring equipment, but the readings made no sense. Her heart rate was too slow and her body temperature was too low by normal standards. She should have been dead already, but she was still breathing and still conscious. Maya sat beside the bed and listened as Seraphine told her story. The elf woman spoke slowly because talking seemed to drain her strength. She said that her world and Earth existed in the same space but in different dimensions. The two worlds were separated by something called the Veiled. Veil was like a wall between dimensions, and it kept the worlds from touching each other for thousands of years. The Veil had been stable and strong, but about 300 years ago, something had started attacking it. The Devourers had found the Veil, and they wanted to break through. Seraphine said that Devourers were not really alive in the way that humans or elves understood life. They were entities made of pure hunger. They consumed energy and life force, and they could drain entire worlds dry. Existed in multiple dimensions at once, which made them very hard to fight. Human weapons could not hurt them because bullets and bombs only affected 3-dimensional space, but the Devourers moved through 4 or 5 or even more dimensions. They were like shadows that could touch you, but you could not touch them, because Reffin's people had developed weapons and magic that could hurt the Devourers. They had fought a long war to protect both worlds. Earth humans never knew about this war because it happened in the spaces between dimensions, but sometimes humans saw signs of its Rophany. Said that what human scientists called dark matter was actually evidence of the Devourers. The missing mass in the universe was not missing at all. It was being consumed by creatures that humans could not see or measure. Maya felt her head spinning as she tried to understand all this. She asked why Seraphine people had protected Earth. Why not just let the Devourers take Earth and keep their own world safe? Seraphine looked sad when she answered. She said that if Earth fell, then the Veil would collapse completely. The Devourers would flood through into her world as well. Both worlds would die, so her people had no choice but to fight. They had built great fortresses along the Veil. They had trained warriors and mages to battle the Devourers. Seraphine herself had been fighting for over 200 years. Maya stared at her because Seraphine looked like she was maybe 30 years old, but the elf woman said that her people aged very slowly. 200 years was not that long for her. Kindasrith had been her partner for most of that time. Dragons in her world bonded with warriors and they fought together as one unit. Bond between dragon and rider was deeper than friendship. It was a joining of minds and souls. What felt the other felt too. That was why Seraphine could sense that Azrith was growing weaker. Even though he was miles away, the binding spell was draining both of them at the same time. Maya asked about the spell and what had happened. Seraphine closed her eyes, and Maya could see pain on her face. Not physical pain, but the pain of betrayal. Seraphine said that 3 days ago there had been a major battle at one of the fortress outposts. The Devourers had attacked in huge numbers. It was the largest assault anyone had seen in decades. Seraphine and Azrith had led the defense, along with 50 other dragon riders. The battle had been fierce, and many had died, but they had been winning. They had pushed the Devourers back and were about to seal a breach in the Veil. Then something had gone terribly wrong. The dimensional anchors that held the Veil stable had suddenly failed. Someone had sabotaged them from the inside. Anchors exploded and tore a massive hole in the Veil. Seraphine and Azrith had been standing right at the breach point. The explosion had thrown them through the hole between worlds. They had fallen through dimension after dimension, tumbling through space and time. As they fell, someone had cast a binding spell on them. The spell was designed to seal dimensional tears by trapping anything that tried to pass through. It was meant to catch Devourers and hold them in place while the Veil repaired itself. Someone had deliberately targeted Seraphine and Azrith with it. The spell had latched onto them and would not let go when they finally crashed. On Earth they were already trapped. The spell was slowly crushing them, draining their life energy to fuel itself, and the worst part was that the tear in the veil was still open because Seraphine and Azrith had not sealed it before they fell now. The Devourers could pour through whenever they wanted. Seraphine said that her people were probably fighting desperately to close the breach. But without her and Azrith, the defense was weakened. She did not know if they could hold. Maya asked, who had betrayed them. Seraphine said she did not know for certain, but she had her suspicions. There was a council member named Mordain, who had always argued for abandoning Earth. He said that her people should focus on defending their own world and let Earth take care of itself. Many had disagreed with him, including Seraphina, but Mordain had supporters and some of them held important positions. Seraphina thought that Mordain might have arranged the sabotage. He might have wanted to eliminate her because she was the strongest voice against his plans. With her gone, he could convince the council to abandon Earth. The veil would collapse and millions of humans would die, but Mordain did not care about that. He only cared about his own people. Maya felt anger burning in her chest. She said that humans deserved to know about the danger. They deserved a chance to fight back. Seraphine agreed, but said it was complicated. Humans knew about the Devourers. They might panic. They might do something that would make the situation worse, and human weapons were useless against the creatures anyway. Only dimensional magic could hurt them. Maya said that humans were good at adapting. If they knew what they were fighting, they could develop new weapons. They could learn magic if that was what it took. Seraphine smiled weakly and said that Maya had a strong spirit. She said that not all humans were as brave, but she agreed that humanity deserved to know the truth. The problem was that Seraphine was dying in 3 or 4 more days. The binding spell would drain her completely. Azrith would die too, and with them would die the knowledge of how to fight the Devourers unless they could find a way to break the spell. Maya asked if there was any way to do that. Seraphine said that theoretically the spell could be broken if they found the breach point. The spell was anchored to the tear in the veil. If you could seal the tear properly, then the spell would lose its power source and collapse. But that was impossible. The breach was not on Earth. It was somewhere in the dimensional space between worlds. There was no way for humans to reach it. They had no magic and no technology that could travel between dimensions. Maya refused to accept that. She said there had to be another way. She said that humans had scientists who studied strange things. Maybe one of them would have an idea. Seraphine looked doubtful, but she said she would help however she could. She described the spell in as much detail as she could manage. She drew diagrams with shaking hands, showing the energy patterns. Kevin and Lisa watched and took notes, even though they understood almost nothing. Claire used her communications equipment to send encrypted messages to scientists around the world. She reached out to physicists and mathematicians, and anyone who studied dimensional theory. Most people ignored the messages. They thought it was a joke or a scam. But one person responded. Her name was Dr. Natalie Cross, and she taught theoretical physics at a university. She had published papers about dimensional membranes and parallel worlds. Scientists thought her work was nonsense, but she believed in it completely. When she received Claire's encrypted message, she knew immediately that it was real. She dropped everything and caught the next flight to the Arctic. She arrived at the base 12 hours later, looking tired but excited. Maya met her at the entrance and took her straight to sea. Seraphine, when Natalie saw the elf woman, she stopped walking and just stared. Tears ran down her face, and she whispered that she had been right all along. Everything she had theorized was true. Maya gave her a few minutes to process what she was seeing. Then she told Natalie that they needed her help. Desperately, she explained about the binding spell and the dying dragon and the threat of the Devourers. Natalie listened to everything, and her expression grew more serious. She examined Seraphine and studied the diagrams. She asked hundreds of questions. Finally, she said that she thought she could help. The spell was like nothing humans had ever created, but it followed rules. It was using energy from the dimensional breach. If they could locate that breach, they might be able to cut off the energy flow. Then the spell would weaken enough to break. Seraphine said again that the breach was not on Earth, but Natalie shook her head. She said that dimensional tears left traces. Colonel Helen Briggs was not happy when Maya requested permission for the mission, and that was putting it mildly, though. Colonel was a stern woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had commanded the Arctic base for 5 years and She ran it by the book. Everything had to follow proper procedure, and chain of command. Maya had just asked her to approve an unauthorized military operation into hostile territory to seal an interdimensional breach. The colonel stared at Maya for a long time without saying anything. Finally, she asked if Maya had lost her mind. Maya said no and showed the colonel all the evidence they had gathered. She brought Natalie to explain the science. She showed video footage of Seraphine and Azreth's, presented the data about the dimensional breach. Colonel Briggs listened to everything with a stone face. When they finished, she stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the frozen landscape for several minutes. Then she turned around and said that officially this mission could not happen if Maya went forward with it. She would be disobeying direct orders. She would face court-martial and possibly prison time. Her career would be over, but then the colonel did something unexpected. Said that unofficially she had not heard anything about this mission. She said that she would be away from the base for the next 72 hours on inspection duty. Whatever happened while she was gone, she would know nothing about. She looked directly at Maya and said that sometimes soldiers had to make hard choices. Sometimes they had to do what was right instead of what was safe. Colonel Briggs said she trusted Maya's judgment. If Maya thought this mission was necessary, then the colonel would not stand in her way, but she could not help either. This was all on Maya. Now Maya felt a weight settle on her shoulders, but she also felt grateful. Colonel was giving her a chance, even if it meant risking her own career. Maya saluted and said she would not let the colonel down. Colonel Briggs returned the salute and then left the office as soon as she was gone. Maya gathered her team. Lisa and Danny were obvious choices. They had been with her from the start, and they believed in the mission Claire would come to because they needed communications. Support. Kevin was essential as their medic. Then Maya made some additional calls. She reached out to people she trusted. She found a pilot named Sam Burke who was willing to fly them in an experimental stealth helicopter. Sam was young and reckless, and he loved breaking rules. He said the mission sounded like fun. Maya also recruited 2 more scientists from Natalie. Team 1 was named Rachel Kim, and she specialized in energy fields. The other was Marcus Stone, and he was an expert in quantum mechanics. Both of them were excited to work on something that could prove their theories correct. Team spent the next day preparing. They loaded equipment into the helicopter. Natalie had built a device she called a resonance generator. It was supposed to emit frequencies that would destabilize the dimensional breach. If her calculations were correct, the breach would seal itself once they triggered the generator. If her calculations were wrong, the device might explode or open the breach even wider. Nobody wanted to think about that possibility. The hardest part was figuring out what to do about Seraphine. She was too weak to walk, and moving her was dangerous, but she insisted on coming with them. She said her knowledge of dimensional magic was crucial. Without her guidance, they might do more harm than good. Maya agreed. Reluctantly, Kevin rigged up a special medical gurney that could be secured in the helicopter. They loaded Seraphine onto it very carefully. Elf woman was getting worse by the hour. Her skin had taken on a gray color, and the glowing marks had almost completely faded. When Maya looked into her golden eyes, she could see pain there, but she also saw determination. Seraphine refused to give up, and that gave Maya strength. The night before they left, Maya visited Azreth. Dragon was still lying in the crater where they had found him. Snow had piled up around his massive body. Maya trudged through the drifts until she reached his head. The golden eye opened and looked at her. She felt Azrith's voice in her mind. The dragon said he was glad she had come. He said he wanted to thank her for taking care of Seraphine. Maya said they were going to fix this. They were going to break the spell and save both of them. Azreth made a sound like a sigh. He said that he had lived for a very long time. He had seen many battles and lost many friends, but he had never met humans like Maya and her team before. Most humans he had observed from afar seemed small and scared. They fought among themselves over pointless things, but Maya was different. She was willing to risk everything for strangers from another world. Azrith said that gave him hope. Maybe humans were stronger than anyone had realized. Maybe they could stand against the devourers. After Maya reached out and touched the dragon's scales, they were cold and rough under her hand. She promised Azrith that she would succeed. She would seal the breach and break the spell. She would bring Seraphine back too. The dragon eye closed slowly. Azrith said he would wait. He said he would hold on as long as he could. Maya out walked back to the base with tears freezing on her face. She was not crying from sadness. She was crying from determination. She would not let Azrith die alone in the snow. She would not let Seraphine fade away. She would not let Earth fall to invisible monsters. They flew out before dawn in Sam experimental helicopter. The aircraft was covered in strange panels that bent radar waves around. It had made almost no sound when it flew. Sam said it was the most advanced stealth technology in the world. He said officially it did not exist. Maya said that seemed to be a theme for this whole mission. The flight took 3 hours across frozen wasteland. They flew low to avoid detection through the windows. Maya could see nothing but white snow and gray sky. Seraphine lay strapped to her gurney with Kevin monitoring her vital signs. The elf woman was barely conscious. Rachel and Marcus huddled over there, equipment double-checking everything. Natalie sat with a laptop running calculations over and over. Lisa cleaned her weapons with mechanical precision. Danny stared out the window, looking tense. Claire kept the communication channels open, listening for any signs of trouble. Finally, Sam announced they were approaching the coordinates. Everyone looked out the windows, trying to see the breach. At first, there was nothing unusual, just more snow and ice than Maya saw it. There was a place where the air looked wrong. It was like looking through heat shimmer on a hot day, but this was different. The shimmer had colors that should not exist, colors that hurt to look at. The space around the shimmer seemed to bend and twist. Maya felt her stomach turn just from watching. Sam said he would land about a mile away. Getting too close to the breach might damage the helicopter. He set them down on a flat area between 2 hills. As soon as they landed, everyone went to work. Lisa and Danny set up a defensive perimeter. Sam stayed with the helicopter, keeping the engines warm in case they needed a quick escape. The others unpacked the equipment. The resonance generator was heavy, and it took 4 people to carry it. They loaded everything onto sleds and started pulling them toward the breach. The temperature was dropping, and the wind was picking up. Kevin said they had maybe 6 hours before the weather became too dangerous. They had to work fast as they got closer to the breach. Maya could see it more clearly. It hung in the air like a wound. In reality, the edges crackled with energy that made her skin tingle. Through the opening, she could see something moving, shapes that did not have solid forms. They twisted and writhed in dimensions her eyes could not quite follow. Maya realized she was looking at the Devourers. They were on the other side of the breach, waiting to come through. The sight filled her with cold dread. Those things wanted to consume Earth. They wanted to drain every living person dry, and they were so close to breaking through. Natalie and her team set up the resonance generator. They positioned it carefully, aimed directly at the breach. Rachel attached cables and ran diagnostic tests. Marcus calibrated sensor. Seraphine gurney was positioned where she could see everything. Elfwoman watched with feverish eyes. She called out instructions in a weak voice. She told them how to adjust the energy frequency. She explained which dimensional layers they needed to target. Natalie listened carefully and made adjustments to her device. After an hour of setup, they were ready. Natalie said they had one shot at this. The generator would run for approximately 10 minutes. During that time, it would emit harmonic frequencies designed to force the breach to collapse, but the process would be violent. The dimensional energies would fight back. Everyone needed to stay clear of the breach itself, and there was another problem. Seraphine said that when the breach started to seal, the binding spell would surge. It would try to draw even more power before its energy source was cut off. Both she and Azrith would experience intense pain. She said there was a chance they might not survive the surge. Maya asked if there was any way to prevent that. Seraphine shook her head slowly. She said this was the risk they had to take. Either the spell would break and they would live, or it would kill them in one final burst. There was no way to know which would happen until they tried. Maya looked at her team. Everyone looked scared, but determined. They had come this far, and they could not turn back. Now she gave the order. Natalie activated the resonance generator. Device started humming with a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The air around the breach began to shimmer more violently. The colors became even more wrong and painful to see. Shapes on the other side started moving faster. Devourers sensed what was happening. The celebration did not last long because they still had a major problem. They were deep in hostile territory, and word of their presence was spreading fast. Sam picked up radio chatter from local militia groups. Someone had seen the light show win. The breach collapsed. Armed groups were moving toward their location. Estimated they had maybe 2 hours before they were surrounded. Danny suggested they load up and leave immediately. But Seraphine said they could not go yet. She explained that closing the breach had only solved half the problem. The dimensional barrier was still weakened. More tiers could appear at any time. She needed to perform a ritual to strengthen the veil in this area. The ritual would take at least an hour. Maya made a quick decision. She told Sam to prep the helicopter for immediate takeoff. She told Lisa and Danny to set up defensive positions. If hostile forces arrive, they would have to hold them off until Seraphine finished her ritual. Claire tried to reach the base, but the radio was not working. Something about the dimensional energies had interfered with their equipment. They were on their own. Seraphine walked to the spot where the breach had been. Her wings of light had faded, but Maya could still sense power radiating from her. The elf woman knelt in the snow and began drawing symbols with her fingerwear. She touched the ground, glowed with golden light. Symbols formed a complex pattern that hurt to look at. Chill and Marcus watched in fascination. This was magic right in front of their eyes. Real, honest magic that science could not explain, at least not yet. Natalie was recording everything with her equipment. She said that after this, the entire field of physics would have to be rewritten. Kevin checked everyone for injuries. Miraculously, nobody was seriously hurt. A few bruises and one twisted ankle, but nothing worse. The dimensional energy wave had been powerful but not harmful. It had felt like it was scanning them, trying to understand what they were. Maya found this thought both fascinating and terrifying. About 30 minutes into Seraphine ritual, they spotted the first vehicles. 3 trucks appeared on the horizon, moving fast. Lisa Dant counted at least 20 armed men. Danny said there would be more coming. These warlord groups traveled in packs. Maya ordered everyone to take cover behind the equipment and the helicopter. She told them not to fire unless fired upon. Maybe they could talk their way out of this. The trucks stopped about 200 yards away. Men poured out carrying rifles and machine guns. They wore mismatched military gear, and none of them looked friendly. One man walked forward ahead of the others. He was tall, with a scarred face and gray eyes that looked like they had seen too much. He carried no weapon, which meant he was either very confident or very stupid. Maya stepped out to meet him. Lisa called after her, saying it was too dangerous, but Maya ignored her. Walked toward the scarred man until they were 10 feet apart. The man studied her carefully. Then he spoke in English with a rough accent. He said his name was Victor Kane, and he controlled this territory. He asked what Maya and her people were doing. Here Maya decided to tell the truth, or at least part of it. She said they had come to seal a dimensional breach. She said they were trying to prevent an invasion by hostile entities. She did not mention Seraphine or the dragon or the war between worlds. Kane stared at her for a long moment, then he laughed. It was not a friendly laugh. He said she must think he was stupid. He said he had seen the light show, and he knew something big had happened. Said he wanted answers or he would take them by force. Maya felt her hand move toward her weapon. But then something unexpected happened. Kane stopped laughing, and his expression changed. He was looking past Maya at something behind her. Maya turned and saw Seraphine standing there. The elf woman had stopped her ritual and walked over. Her golden eyes were fixed on Kane. She spoke to him directly. She asked if he remembered his dreams. Kane went pale. His hand moved to touch a scar on his neck. He said he had dreamed of a woman with golden eyes. He had dreamed of her fighting shadow creatures. He had been having the same dream for weeks. He thought he was going crazy. Seraphine nodded slowly. She said the dreams were real. She explained that sometimes when the veil was thin, humans could sense things from the other side. Kane had been dreaming of her battles against the Devourers. His mind had been touching the dimensional barrier without him knowing it. This meant he was sensitive to dimensional energies. Some humans were born with this sensitivity. They could sense magic and see through illusions. They were rare, but they existed. Kane looked shaken. He ordered his men to lower their weapons. He said he needed to understand what was happening. Maya made another decision. She told Kane everything. She explained about Seraphine and Azareths, explained about the Devourers and the war between dimensions. She explained that they had just sealed a breach, but that Earth was still in danger. Kane listened without interrupting his men gathered around to listen. To some of them looked skeptical, but others nodded as if things were finally making sense when Maya finished. Kane was quiet for a long time, then he said something that surprised everyone. He said he believed her. He said he had seen too many strange things in his life to dismiss this story. He had seen people die for no reason. He had seen shadows that moved wrong. He had felt cold spots that should not exist. He had always thought these things were just part of living in a harsh world. Now he understood they were signs of the hidden war. Kane asked what Serafini and Maya needed. Serafina said she needed to finish strengthening the veil. She said it would take another 30 minutes. Kane nodded and told his men to set up a perimeter. He said anyone who tried to interrupt would have to go through him first. His men moved quickly to follow orders. Some of them kept glancing at Seraphine with wonder. One young soldier asked if she was an angel. Seraphine smiled and said no. She said she was just a soldier like them, fighting to protect people who did not know they needed protecting. The young soldier looked at her with something like worship in his eyes while Seraphine worked on her ritual. Maya talked more with Kane. She asked why he was helping them. Kane said that he had been fighting for 20 years in this wasteland. He had killed men and watched friends die. He had done terrible things to survive, but he had never fought for anything that mattered. This was different. This was a chance to protect the whole world. This was a chance to do something good. Maya understood that feeling. She asked if Kane would be willing to help in the future if more breaches appeared. Would he and his men stand with them? Kane said yes. Without hesitation, he said that if there was a war to fight, then he wanted to be part of it. His men agreed. They had been fighting over scraps and territory for years. Fighting to save the world sounded a lot more interesting. Finished her ritual and the ground stopped glowing. She stood up looking tired, but satisfied. She said the veil was stable here. Now more breaches would appear in this location for a long time, but there were probably other weak spots, other places where the devourers might try to break through. They would need to find and strengthen all of them. That would take time and resources. Maya said they would figure it out. She said Earth had people who could help, scientists and soldiers and others who would believe once they saw the evidence. Kane said he could help spread the word. He knew people in other territories. Not all of them were friendly, but they might be willing to listen if he vouched for the story. Claire finally got her radio working again. She contacted the base and gave them a status report. Colonel Briggs had returned and she wanted to speak with Maya. Immediately Maya took the radio and prepared for the worst, but the colonel surprised her. She said that something had happened at the base while they were gone. Nisrith had risen from the crater. The dragon had flown over the base, and everyone had seen him. There was no way to cover this up anymore. The colonel said that high-ranking military officials were already on their way. Wanted answers about the dragon and the elf woman and everything else. Maya felt her stomach sink. She had hoped to have more time before going public with this, but the colonel said it might be for the best. She said the world needed to know about the threat, and they needed to start preparing. Maya agreed. She said they would return to base immediately. They loaded up the helicopter and prepared to leave. Kane came over to say goodbye. He gave Maya a radio frequency. He said to contact him if they needed help. He said he and his men would be ready. Seraphin shook Kane hand. She said he had a warrior spirit. She said that if he wanted, he could learn to fight the devourers properly. She could teach him and his men the techniques her people used. Kane's eyes lit up. He said he would like that very muchas. They flew back to base. Maya looked at her team. Everyone was exhausted, but there was something else in their eyes. Pride. They had done the impossible. They had sealed a dimensional breach and saved 2 lives. They had made allies in the most unlikely place, and they had taken the first step toward protecting Earth from a threat nobody knew existed. Sam flew them through the gray sky while below the frozen wasteland stretched out endlessly. Maya thought about everything that had happened in the past few days. Her whole world had changed. Had learned that magic was real and that other dimensions existed. Had learned that Earth had been under threat for centuries. Without anyone knowing, she had learned that sometimes the enemy was not another country or terrorist group. Sometimes the enemy was something far stranger and more dangerous. But she had also learned something else. She had learned that humans were capable of incredible things. When they had to be, they could adapt to impossible situations. The meeting room was packed with people who looked very important and very unhappy. Generals and politicians and scientists filled every seat. Some of them had flown in from across the world. They all wanted answers about the dragon and the elf woman, and the impossible things that had been reported. Maya stood at the front of the room with Seraphine beside her. Colonel Briggs sat in the corner watching everything carefully, and her team were there too with laptops and data for 3 hours. Maya explained everything she told them about finding Seraphine and Azrith in the crater. She told them about the Devourers and the war between dimensions. She told them about the binding spell and the breach and the mission to seal it. She showed them video footage and energy readings and all the evidence they had collected. Some people listened with open minds. Others clearly thought this was all nonsense. One senator kept saying it was impossible and demanding proof. Seraphine finally stood up. She had been quiet for most of the meeting. Now she spoke in a voice that commanded attentions. She said that humans had a choice to make. They could deny what was in front of them and wait until the Devourers came, or they could accept reality and start preparing. The senator said he needed more proofs. A fiend looked at him with her golden eyes. Then she did something that made everyone gasp. She spread her wings. Wings of pure light filled the room with golden radiance. They were not physical, but everyone could see them clearly. The energy from them made the air hum. Papers blew around the room. Electronic equipment sparked and flickered. Seraphine held the wings spread for 10 seconds. Then she folded them away, and they vanished. She sat back down. Calmly, the senator was pale and silent. Nobody asked for more proof after that. The discussion shifted to what should be done. Some people wanted to keep everything secret. They said that releasing this information would cause panic. People would riot or lose faith in their governments. Others argued that people deserved to know. They said humanity had a right to understand the danger. Debate went back and forth for hours. Finally, one general named Patricia Holmes stood up. She was older than most of the others, with white hair and calm, icy. She said that secrecy would not work. Too many people had already seen Azrith too. Many soldiers at the base knew the truth. The story would leak eventually. Better to control the narrative than let rumors spread. General Holmes suggested forming a special task force, a group dedicated to studying the dimensional threats and developing defenses. It would include military personnel and scientists and anyone else with relevant skills. Seraphine would work with them too. Share her knowledge together. They would locate other weak spots in the veil and strengthen them. They would develop weapons that could fight the Devourers. They would prepare humanity for the war that most people did not know existed. The proposal was met with mixed reactions, but after more debate it was approved. General Holmes would lead the task force. Maya would be promoted and serve as her second in command. Natalie, her scientist, would head up the research division, and Seraphine would serve as an advisor and trainer. The meeting ended late at night. Everyone was exhausted. Maya walked out with Seraphina. Elf woman looked tired, but there was relief in her eyes. She said she had not been sure humans would accept the truth. She said she was glad to be wrong. Maya said that humans could be stubborn, but they were also practical. When faced with undeniable evidence, they could adapt quickly. They walked to the area where Azrith was resting them. Dragon had been given a large section of the base to himself. Soldiers still stared when they saw him, but they were getting used to his presence. Azrith raised his massive head as they approached. His golden eyes studied Maya. She felt his voice in her mind. He said that she had done well. He said that bringing humans into the fight was the right decision. He said that his people had been wrong to keep Earth ignorant for so long. Maybe if humans had known, they could have helped defend the Veil years ago. Rafina agreed. She said that her people had been too proud. They had thought humans were too primitive to understand dimensional threats. But humans were more capable than anyone had realized, as Reth said. He was eager to return home. He wanted to let Seraphine people know what had happened. He wanted to tell them about the humans who had saved them, but Seraphine looked uncertain. She said that returning might be dangerous. Whoever betrayed them was still out there. If they went back, they might be walking into a trap. Maya said they would not go alone. She said that Earth would send representatives, a delegation to meet with Seraphine people to establish formal contact between the two worlds to offer assistance in the war against the Asera. Devourer Seraphine looked surprised. She asked if Earth was really ready for that. Maya said probably not, but they would do it anyway, because that was what humans did. Jumped into impossible situations and figured things out as they went to Zaeth. Made a sound that might have been laughter, he said he was. Beginning to like humans over the next few weeks, the task force took shape. General Holmes assembled a team of over 200 people, military specialists and scientists and engineers and more. They set up a new facility in a secure location they called it Project Veil. Watch Kane and 30 of his best fighters were recruited and brought in. They were given official military status and proper training. Kane took to it naturally. He had been leading men in combat for years now. He was learning to fight an entirely different kind of enemy. Sharafin trained them personally. She taught them how to sense dimensional disturbances, taught them combat techniques that worked against entities from other planes. She showed them how to use specially designed weapons that Natalie team was developing. The weapons used a combination of electromagnetic pulses and dimensional resonance. They could disrupt the Devourer's connection to physical space. It would not kill the creatures, but it could drive them back. Maya led the tactical training. She taught Kane men how to work as a coordinated unit. She taught them strategy and discipline. They were rough around the edges, but they learned fast. Lisa and Danny helped with the training. 2 to 3 of them made a good team. Meanwhile, Natalie and her scientists made breakthrough after breakthrough working with Seraphine. Knowledge, they began to understand dimensional mechanics. They built sensors that could detect veil weaknesses, created predictive models showing where breaches were most likely to occur. HL discovered that certain rare earth minerals resonated with dimensional energy. These minerals could be used to strengthen the veil or to power weapons. Marcus developed a mathematical framework for understanding multidimensional spaces. Equations would become the foundation for an entirely new branch of physics. Work was exhausting, but exciting. Everyone felt like they were part of something historic. 3 weeks after the initial meeting, Seraphine said she was ready to return home. Resrith had fully recovered his strength. The binding spell had left no permanent damage. Maya volunteered to go with them as Earth Representative. General Holmes approved the mission. She selected 5 others to accompany Maya, Lisa, and Danny, of course Natalie, to document everything from a scientific perspective. A diplomat named Susan Cole to handle formal negotiations. Kane, because he had proven himself invaluable. They spent 2 days preparing. Seraphine explained what they should expect. She said her world was very different from Earth. Magic was common there, and technology followed different principles. Her people lived in great cities built with both stone and spell work. They would be meeting with the High Council, a group of elders who governed her civilization. Some council members would be welcoming, others would be suspicious of humans. One of them might be the traitor who had tried to kill Seraphine. They would need to be very careful. The crossing between worlds would happen at a stable dimensional junctions. Arafine had located one about 50 miles from the base. General Holmes arranged for the entire area to be secured. No unauthorized personnel would be allowed within 10 miles. On the morning of departure, a crowd gathered to see them off. Soldiers and scientists lined up to watch. Colonel Briggs came to shake Maya hand. She said, come back safe, she said. Earth needed good soldiers like Maya. Maya promised she would return. She said she had too much work left to do. The team gathered at the crossing point. Seraphin and Azrith stood at the center of a complex symbol they had drawn. Symbol glowed with golden lights. Arafin began speaking in a language Maya did not recognize. The air started to shimmer. A bent and twisted day doorway appeared, floating in mid-earth. Through it, Maya could see another play screen. Fields under a purple sky, towers of crystal rising in the distance. It was beautiful and alien and terrifying, as Arama sort of Fin-On gestured for them to follow. She and Azreth stepped through the doorway. Maya took a deep breath. Then she followed. Lisa and Danny came right behind her. Kane hesitated for only a second before jumping through. Natalie and Susan came last. The sensation of crossing was strange. It felt like being pulled apart and put back together for a moment. Maya existed in multiple places at once. She could see Earth behind her and the new world ahead. She could feel the veil pressing against her. Then it was over. She stood on solid ground. The air smelled different, sweeter somehow, with hints of flowers. She had Never encountered the gravity felt slightly lighter when she looked up. The sky was indeed purple too. Suns hung overhead, one red and one yellow in the distance. The crystal towers gleamed but closer. Maya saw something that made her blood run cold.